So the barriers to entry have come down dramatically. If you want something in space now, it's not a huge lift to get it there. How to do that responsibly is a different story. We haven't seen the threat realistically, nor have we understood, clearly how vulnerable we are. Four biggest players in the space data are the United States, China, Russia, and Slingshot.
Hey, warriors, here is a wild fact for you. You probably use space 20 times before you even get out of bed, from checking your phone to that morning Venmo coffee payment. And that's exactly why you need to hear from Tim Solms today, our guest, a former Apache pilot who's now leading one of the coolest companies in the space game, Slingshot Aerospace. After running Microsoft's defense business, Tim took over as CEO of Slingshot, which has become such a powerhouse, it's now one of the world's top 4 collectors of space data, right up there with US, China, and Russia. Since 24, he's been laser focused on what keeps him up at night, keeping tabs on an increasingly crowded space environment that pretty much runs our daily lives. This is one you can't afford to miss. So welcome to the studio, Tim. What's the one space vulnerability that business leaders are dangerously overlooking?
I'd say apathy.
Tell me more.
Right? You touch space 20 times before you leave your bedroom in the morning. Right? Everything that we do, from communications to the time on the time on your phone, there is so much now that relies upon space. If you send a text message to make sure your daughter's ready for school on time.
Oh, I've got the cameras, the sat cams that tell me what they're wearing on the way out the door.
Okay. It just our reliance on space has become ubiquitous. Yet it is a thinly protected set of capabilities that we have. And like it or not, there are people that are more than happy to disrupt our way of living, our way of doing things. And all of our financial transactions are timed using the GPS clock, right? Those are algorithms that are built to manage the finances of the free world. Well, are all extremely vulnerable to bad actors or nefarious activity in space. And I do see that we haven't seen the threat realistically, nor have we understood, clearly how vulnerable we are and how we make sure that we can protect it.
When you say bad actors, I'm thinking of China and Russia. How are Chinese and Russian space capabilities reshaping the business landscape for both U.S. companies as well as our allies?
Well, I'm going to start by giving you just some of the metrics that we track. You know, I'm allowed to run Slingshot Aerospace. That's a lot of fun. That company is 7 years old.
Remind me when you took the helm.
A year ago, January of 2024.
And you and I met right after you took the helm. Tell me about how this experience with Slingshot influenced your thoughts around, our views on space.
Katherine, I have a lot of daughters, right? And I tell them all the time, be careful what you do well, because those are the things that you will be doing. I spent a career in the military, and I grew up as a military kid. I've been around it my entire life. And I was an attack pilot, and that was a lot of fun. Got to fly Apaches and some other things too. And as I made the decision to leave the military, it was just shy of 19 years. Nobody leaves the military just shy of 19 years. But I had an opportunity to go into technology. And, we can talk, with your background, the transition was not as graceful as I had hoped, but I do see where people gave me a lot of grace in return, and was able to make that transition. But I've always been focused on defense, and then federal and public sector. That has been the scope of my world for quite a while. I am passionate about the mission. I'd say I'm unapologetically patriotic, right? I believe in what we're doing. We don't always do it well, but I really believe in what we're doing. And so, I started off in the hardware world. I quickly went to software. And then, I showed up and I took uh, what was the defense business of a very large software company, and it was a turnaround. But the defense business at the time, and probably still is, was the largest single business at Microsoft. And when I walked in, it felt like a contract management organization, and the potential was not being Microsoft's potential was not being intentionally brought forward to align to the mission of the Department of Defense. So that was the transformation. Forget the sales skill side or the inspection side. It was, how are we bringing the capabilities of this company to align to the specific mission needs of the customer, and doing that well. So that was the transformation. As a gray haired 6'3" former attack pilot, nobody wants to hear it's a turnaround business. So I now say we re-optimize for growth. Like, how do we re-optimize for growth? And was able to do that. And so that's where I go, be careful what you do well. So once you sort of get stamped with, hey, this person has a team of cohorts who are really good about helping pivot organizations. That's what I did. But I very quickly moved over to the data and analytics side of things. And that's where I really found a passion. There's so much you can do with data. I wound up through private equity getting pulled in to take a very large fintech company, 180-year-old fintech company, taking it private, helping to restructure that, taking it public again. And boy, learned so much in that process, right? Very humbling when you have, almost 20 years of military leadership. And at that point, 18 years of business leadership. And you're like, wow, I am so grateful to have a seat at the table, because I am learning stuff that I've never been exposed to before. And so that really got me intrigued. So from there, I'm like, okay, went back into PE, was doing some operating partner stuff in PE, and Slingshot, came onto the radar. And I was like, wow, this is a data and analytics company focused on space, closely partner with the government. And, we had three co-founders, and I shout out to them all the time, because there was an elegance and a brilliance to what they were able to bring to fruition.
Well, and on our podcast too, we've had the debate round and round. Nobody wants to tell a founder that their baby's ugly. Can you be successful scaling with founders on board? You walked into a big situation there.
Well, I walked into an opportunity, and I'm not trying to be kind. So Melanie Strickland, basically was the brainchild. Slingshot was her brainchild. She was E1 to O4 in the Air Force. I was E1 to O4 in the Army. I could not have even come close to doing what she did. She brought Tommy Ashman with her. They grabbed David Godwin, who had some startup experience, and the three of them had an idea. And, they were really quick to say, yeah, we don't want to go down this path. Let's go down that path. And finally said, hey, there are things that we can really do well. And it was, we can aggregate data, we can analyze data, we can really provide great insights. We can bring a level of digital clarity to space, which is currently in an analog environment. And they did some acquisitions very early on, which nobody does that early at that early stage. Did two acquisitions, actually did three. Two of them made them data originators. And now you're originating data and curating that data. So this 150-person space company has created the largest pool of commercially available space data in existence. The four biggest players in the space data are the United States, China, Russia, and Slingshot.
Well, okay, we were talking China and Russia. Tell me more about, and that I'm blown away by number 4 in terms of Slingshot. But given that connection, tell me more about how that's reshaping the landscape around traditional US companies and allies.
Well, we always talk about dual use space, right? In technology, dual use between, usually it's defense and there's this defense tech. There is no clear bright line between defense and commercial when it comes to space. Um, you know, it is ambiguous as borders are once you get 100 miles above the Earth's surface, right? And once we started seeing major space endeavors being resupplied and supported by commercial entities, we really knew that the commercial world was on board. When Slingshot was founded, there were less than 20 countries that had space programs. 7 years later, there are over 88. We had 50 some odd companies in space. We've added over 400 commercial companies over the last 7 years. Um, so the barriers to entry have come down dramatically. If you want something in space now, it's not a huge lift to get it there. How to do that responsibly is a different story.
Well, tell me more about how to do it responsibly.
So we talked about, hey, I'm now a country, of any size, stature, geopolitical influence, but I want to have my own space program. I want to have sovereign capability, which means I want to be able to launch, get into orbit, operate in orbit, do whatever it is. I want a weather satellite, or I want a communication satellite, or
We want to play. We want it.
whatever it is. Yeah, yeah, they want in, and they want to be able to do that. Using, they want to be able to do that on their own. They do not want to have to rely on a major country in space. So U.S. has always led when it comes to space, and has always stepped up to any challenges in leading in space. And now you have countries that go, hey, whether it's the U.S. or the U.K., we want to be able to maintain our own assets. So we don't have 50 years of controlling assets in orbit. How do you do that? How do you organically build something so that you can control expensive objects as they orbit the Earth in any one of the orbital domains? And then at the same time, do that in a responsible way. Because when you mess up in space, you are on the world stage. I don't care how big or small your country is, how big or small your budget is. There's no hiding. Like when you collide with something, when there's metal to metal contact in orbit, the world knows.
That's an interesting way to put it. What advice would you give to a CEO in defense that something that should be keeping them up at night related to space?
Nobody looks at me and says, "Hey, there's a guy with deep roots in space." Right? I am grateful and fortunate to be, at this space company, and the background that I bring, whether it's mission alignment or P&L management or the ability to find and retain great talent, is what has me in a place where I can add value to this company. Right. So I'm not a big thinker in space, but I have a lot of them right at my fingertips. And what I would say more than anything else is let the data guide your decisions, right? But you have to go look at it. What is the data telling me, right? About, how operational the space domain actually is. By the way, it has the highest operating rhythm of any other domain in existence. You could look at the war in Ukraine, or you could look at any place of unrest, and there is no operational regime anywhere that is outpacing what we're seeing in space.
So space never sleeps.
Not only does it not sleep, but it is the level of activity just continues to scale exponentially. So I'm going to go back to Mel Strickland, Tommy Ashman, David Godwin, focusing on the problem side of space, right? That grows exponential to participation. Like, great. So, what we do continues to grow dramatically. We track objects, and we get observations, and we've got, ground stations all over the planet.
And you alert if there's going to be any collision or there's weird stuff that shouldn't be there.
We do. And but by, when we passively look, when we have those steering arrays and we're looking horizon to horizon all the time, all around the globe, you see everything that's going on. And you see when something is anomalous. Like, okay, well, why is it doing that? And I don't want to make this an advertisement for Slingshot, right? But here's a for instance. So from the time this company started, we hit 1 billion observations the first week of July of 2024. So from the time Slingshot started to first week of July of this past July, we hit 1 billion observations. Katherine, we hit 2 billion observations the week of Christmas. So from beginning of July to the third week of December, we hit we double the number of observations we've had. Part of that is from innovation, right? We have teams that are innovating and developing things that are pretty cool that get to see more stuff more often. And the other part of that is how active, we are across myriad orbital regimes from low Earth orbit, up to geo, looking at cislunar and sun synchronous orbits. You got to let the data drive your strategy. And the data says that I've got to responsibly get into, operate, and out of orbit. And I have to be watching the collective maneuver that's going on around me, right? I have to be, what is going on? It's no longer, how can I just stay out of the way of other objects? It's who is interfering with the GPS signals? How is solar weather or going to impact our ability to support a mission? And I use the analogy. Let's go back to World War II, right? Because every old guy talks about World War II. The German Navy, the Kriegsmarine, started sending out packs of submarines rather than individual submarines, and they maneuvered collectively. That is what we're seeing out of China, Russia, North Korea, Iran.
I'm thinking like drone swarms too, in terms of the approach.
We see that they are operating in constellations. So now you have individual maneuver and you also have, collective maneuver in constellations. What are those constellations doing? What is their intent? Is there a potential to disrupt, what we have become so accustomed to from a lifestyle perspective or a defense perspective, or just traveling from point A to point B? So think about driving somewhere, how to get there, stopping, making the transaction at an ATM machine, all relies upon space. Yeah. And so there's vulnerabilities there. So take that to the defense grade, the defense industrial base. It's really understanding, hey, there's opportunity, absolutely opportunity in space, but what does the data say we need to do to make sure that we're prepared for if and when something goes wrong?
That makes sense. Well, think about how many times we just do banking in a given day or week. Something goes wrong on that end, all hell breaks loose.
So let me throw a question back at you. Right, you're in the people business, and you focused in on this sector for a reason. What trends are you seeing from a talent management perspective across the entire space industry?
Ooh, good question. Well, the most interesting part is coming out of aerospace and defense. In general, space people do not like to be called aerospace people. That's the first nuance. We're different.
And I'm an aerospace guy that loves being called
Right.
space guy.
So you may be an outlier, Tim. Um, so there is this respect of diversity. This is not the old Boeing planes that I grew up around coming out of Seattle as well. We see definitely a bit more tech culture and overlap between the defense tech side and the space side. We see youthfulness. We see a lot more Bay Area influence in terms of female and leadership roles, which I know you've got 5 daughters and an awesome team of female leaders there at Slingshot as well. Culturally, Hmm. Culturally, we're seeing space among the whole aerospace, sat, and defense crew kind of lead that way. And I include sat in that as well. Um, the talent pool for very specific things is just dry as heck. And how we do a good job of getting more youthful individuals from the software technical engineering side is something that for me we all need to do a better job of because everybody is kicking our ass right now. Electrics, anything auto related, anything with the word software in it. We're all competing for the same smart kids. So I think that's the big kind of announcement I would make in terms of the space industry.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Again, what I have found is because we have this massive amount of, data, that the folks who are really interested in innovating are knocking on the door, right? They're looking to come and say, hey, I'm building, fantastic machine learning, fantastic AI because I've got this incredible, corpus of data with which to work. And that's been, you know, really beneficial to the business and ultimately in support of our customers because they're doing some fascinating things.
There are certain companies like yours. Every kid wants to work. Yeah, because we always ask candidates, hey, what are the top 5 places you want to work? One, out of personal curiosity. Secondly, if we got contacts, we'll make intros. But everybody says Slingshot, Palantir, Anduril.
We've got a long way to go to start playing in that deep end of the pool. But those are our. You look at what made those companies really exceptional, and I would say first and foremost they cultivated a culture, right? And we all hear culture beats strategy every time, and it does. I've been at great companies where the culture was so bad it didn't matter how much you made, you couldn't get out of there fast enough. And so I do think that we have to be really intentional about that. And it's not something that's one and done. Number two is, are you doing something innovative and disruptive? Right. So is the culture great? Are you doing something that's interesting? And then the third part that I look at, as somebody who's been in companies and now being allowed to run a company is, are people empowered to make an impact? Right. Have you structured the organization and you know, put measurements in place and job descriptions in place where people go, I can make an impact in my role. I know what I'm being asked to do. I know when and where I'm going to be inspected. I know what success looks like, and I know how to deliver. And that allows organizations to accelerate. And I think that, those other two companies, Anduril and Palantir you mentioned, have both done unbelievably well.
Absolutely. Well, welcome to the neighborhood. You're on the list too. You've led through some major tech transitions, Tim. How do you get
That's just a nice way of saying that I'm old now, Catherine.
I thought it was nice.
Yes, I have. Yeah, yeah,
How do
I,
you
I
build
have.
unity when you've got so many smart people and the stakes are incredibly high?
How do you build unity? This is something I learned at the private equity table, and it blew me away. It was the first time I had ever seen this, and it's what I call a decentralized strategy. Right. So, um, there was a gentleman who I still think of as an extremely a powerful mentor. I reach out to him all the time. Not an easy person to work for, but I absolutely love working for him. And instead of saying, here is the strategy for the company, he put the team to task and said, come up with a number of strategic objectives. I want you all to come up with those strategic objectives. And they sound like platitudes, right? And I was like, where is this going? Ultimately, he came back and, okay, we agree with these. We refined these. We can define what each one of there were 6. And lo and behold, we're doing the same thing at Slingshot, and there are 6. Not the same, but they're close. Then he said, okay, I am going to write my accountabilities to those 6 objectives, my plan and my accountabilities to those 6 objectives. That is my strategic plan to those objectives. And then he said, and then each of you are not going to have to, you're going to be informed by my plan and you're going to write your plans to those objectives, being informed by mine, all the way down to every single person in the organization. What's the, how do you keep cynicism from creeping in? And which is inevitable in any company. People know what they're doing. They know what the strategy is. They know what their part of the strategy is. And in doing that, what I saw was a way to empower organizations to say, okay, I am a part of, I know exactly how I fit into the strategy. And oh, by the way, if you ask me to do something that doesn't align with those strategic objectives, I can challenge you and say, well, whoa, you're asking me to do something that isn't part of this plan. So let's rethink if that's the best use of our time, money, other resources.
What is the one step business leaders should take to build space resilience?
For me, it's all about people, right? You have to be looking for that exceptional talent to be a part of developing capabilities and technology. I have a lot of good and bad reputation. On the good side, I will say, the ability to build teams has been something that I've for the last 25 years since I've been in technology, I would say, I've been able to build that track record.
No, you've put together big teams that have accomplished a lot. Yeah, no, that is a fact, not a compliment. Yes.
I look for 3 things that can't be taught. These are things that parents had to teach, right? I look for incredibly smart people, like high level of intellectual horsepower is the number one thing. Like super, super smart. Number 2, creative. Folks that can really think, around ideas, aren't stuck in a process. They can be really creative. And then the third thing is the ability to turn ideas into action. I have found that it's very easy to find 2 out of those 3, and it's hard to find 3 out of 3. And when I find somebody who has all 3 of those, smart, creative, and really good at turning ideas into action, I hire them. Again, nobody wants me to be tactical. People want me to be strategic, right? When I start getting tactical, something's gone wrong. I mean, I appreciate you inviting me on this podcast, but I don't want to be the face of Slingshot. I don't. I want every great, brilliant person in the company to be part of Slingshot's brand. I want them out there speaking, sitting on panels, talking about what makes the company great, right? I'm not the demographic that's going to make Slingshot exceptional. From a leadership perspective, I've got a fiduciary responsibility to our employees, our board, our investors, our customers, our partners, right? Those people absolutely can and should hold me accountable. But the brilliance of what brings this company forward is putting together those incredible teams and letting them go, right? Really letting them run and understand, hey, what's the objective? What are we looking for to get there, and kind of what your left and right boundaries are. But within that, go. And that's where you start getting some really creative and innovative things back into the fold. And that's culture that draws more people in. And then you're just, you're sort of lather, rinse, repeat. Growing a great company.
We are eager to see what Slingshot does here in 2025. Thank you so much.